Hi, I'm Arliss. At my sister's promotion, she sneered. She used to be in the military, for a bit. The room laughed, until the officer behind her turned, locked eyes with me, and snapped a salute. "General," he said, "it's an honor, ma'am." The laughter died, my family went silent, and even my father couldn't look up. So tell me, what would you do if your own blood tried to bury your legacy just to shine in your shadow? Before we dive in, what time are you listening, and where from? Drop a comment. I read everyone. The envelope showed up on a drizzly Thursday, wedged between grocery flyers and an overdue utility bill. Heavy cream stock, my full legal name typed in perfect block letters, Arliss Jean Rains, and beneath it, a single line of embossed gold, Lieutenant Colonel Shelby Rains, promotion ceremony. 3 years of silence, broken by a form letter that didn't even bother with a handwritten note. I stood at the mailbox long enough for the neighbor's dog to bark twice. My first instinct was to tear the thing in half and feed it to the rain gutter. Instead, I slipped the envelope into my jacket pocket and walked inside, shoes squeaking on the tile. The house smelled of coffee gone cold. Funny, after everything I had survived overseas, it was a piece of stationery that made my hands shake. I laid the invitation on the kitchen table next to a scuffed brown leather folio. The folio still wore the faint outline of a silver star once clipped to its cover, a medal my parents claimed had been misplaced during renovations. I never argued, you can't reclaim what someone refuses to see. But that empty imprint reminded me I hadn't imagined my service, no matter how many times Shelby laughed that I'd washed out. I brewed fresh coffee, sat, and read the invite again. No personal greeting, just ceremony details and an RSVP line with a bold deadline. Intentional slight or clerical oversight? Hard to tell with my family. Erasure had become their second language. I could have ignored it. I almost did. Then a sentence from my late mentor floated up, the way her voice always did when I hovered between hiding and showing up. Courage isn't volume, it's presence. I decided to attend, not to defend myself, not to confront anyone, but to be present. Sometimes occupying space is the loudest rebuttal. I booked a modest roadside motel 2 hours south of D.C., the kind with chipped key cards and coffee that tastes like burnt hopes. Packing was simple, civilian slacks, a navy blazer, and the folio. No uniform, no insignia. I locked the house, tossed my overnight bag in the back seat, and pointed the car north. The drive was long enough for ghosts to hitch a ride. I remembered the day I enlisted, 30 minutes after college graduation. Shelby had thrown a party that night. She toasted herself as future backbone of the Army, while Dad proudly nodded. Mom pulled me aside, whispered, "Let her have this. You'll find another path." I did find one, just not the path they pictured. Traffic slowed near Quantico. I watched an officer in training jog along the fence line, cadence echoing against gray clouds. I felt an old itch to fall into step, but I kept my foot steady on the brake. By late afternoon, I reached the Capitol Beltway. The hotel's sign flickered vacancy in sputtering neon. I checked in, ironed my blazer, and tried not to overthink. No sense rehearsing imaginary confrontations. Next morning I arrived at the hotel ballroom early. Staff buzzed around, taping last-minute banners. A volunteer glanced at the guest list and handed me a plastic name card. Instead of Arliss Rains, it read, "Guest of Shelby." I swallowed a bitter smile. Strike one. I found an empty seat near the back. 10 minutes passed before my parents entered. Dad's dress jacket strained at the shoulders. He scanned the room but looked right past me. Mom spotted me, approached with a clipped smile. "Keep it low-key," she whispered. "Shelby deserves today." Low-key. A polite synonym for invisible. I nodded because arguing would only prove their point. Shelby made her entrance in full dress blues, ribbons catching the stage lights. She locked eyes with me, smirked, and turned to her entourage. We hadn't spoken since the reunion, since she announced to 50 relatives that I couldn't hack boot camp, and quit. Funny how a lie becomes family scripture when repeated with enough champagne. When the ceremony started, conversations hushed. The commanding officer delivered a polished introduction. Cameras rolled. Shelby approached the podium, posture flawless. She scanned the audience, landed on me, and let out a little laugh that carried across the microphone. "Oh, that's my sister in the back. She used to be in the military, for a bit." A ripple of polite chuckles followed. I felt eyes travel to me, then away, as if contact might contaminate them. I didn't flinch. Instead, I rested a hand on the folio lying across my lap. The camera operator filming stage right tilted his head, studying me, his lens lowered an inch. "Ma'am," he murmured, recognition dawning. "Are you—" I raised one finger, a silent promise, or maybe a warning. Not yet. I didn't come to interrupt her moment. I came to reclaim mine. Fate showed its hand the moment the band struck the first note of "The Army Goes Rolling Along." I settled into the back row, blazer buttoned, hands folded over the leather folio resting across my knees. Up front, Shelby shone like a polished coin, shoulders squared, smile rehearsed. Dad sat near the aisle, back rigid with pride. Mom dabbed at the corners of her eyes, though nothing sad had happened yet. I was a distant silhouette to them, deliberately out of focus. A colonel stepped to the microphone to recite Shelby's record. Rapid promotions, joint command commendations, a fellowship or two I knew she'd earned with charm more than sweat. Applause came on cue. Dad offered the stiff little nod he reserved for moments he believed proved him right. Then the MC cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce Major General Thomas K. Whitmore, Commanding General of Fort Belvoir, who will present today's promotion certificate." The doors at the side of the stage opened. General Whitmore strode in, ribbons bright against midnight blue. Shelby turned, smile locked in place. She lifted her chin, awaiting the handshake that would crown the afternoon. But the general's gaze never reached her. Mid-stride, he paused, eyes narrowing at the back of the hall. I felt the weight of his stare land directly on me. For a heartbeat, I considered shrinking, but the folio warmed beneath my palms, reminding me why I was there. Whitmore pivoted off the carpeted center path, cutting between rows of officers. Murmurs rose like static. He walked past captains, majors, full-bird colonels, men and women who outranked the Shelby they were here to celebrate, and stopped 3 feet in front of my seat. He came to rigid attention. His right hand snapped to his brow in an unmistakable salute, the slap of his palm against the brim echoing off ballroom walls. "General Rains," he said, voice steady enough to still the room. "It's an honor, ma'am." A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered. The murmurs turned into a low, collective gasp. Shelby's mouth hung open. Color drained from Mom's cheeks. Dad's jaw clenched as if he'd bitten into something rotten. I rose because remaining seated felt disrespectful. To him, to myself, to every soul who'd followed my orders in places that never make tourist brochures. I returned his salute, crisp and sure, the movement still living in muscle memory. "Appreciate the courtesy, General," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I'm here today as a guest. Please continue with your ceremony." He nodded once, the flicker of a respectful smile in his eyes, then turned back toward the stage. The audience tracked him like a spotlight, then swiveled toward me. The invisible sister had form, rank, history, facts too loud to ignore now. Whispers rippled. "Did he say General? That's Shelby's sister? I thought she left basic after a month." Shelby regained enough composure to step to the microphone. The tremor in her voice betrayed her as she tried to reclaim the script. "Thank you, General Whitmore, for honoring our family with your presence. As you all know, today is about teamwork and perseverance." But no one heard the rest. Attention clung to the back row, where I lowered myself into the chair and folded the folio shut. I felt neither triumph nor spite, only a calm rightness settling across my shoulders. Years of silence stitched themselves into a single undeniable fact. I existed, and the room finally saw it. Mom shot me a look, equal parts confusion and injured pride. Dad's stare was colder, as if sheer disapproval could demote me on the spot. Shelby's hands fluttered over the podium papers, searching for the line that would return control. There wasn't one. I remained quiet, meeting no one's gaze for long. I wasn't there to bask or explain. The truth had done its work in a single salute. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation, and they weren't ready for it. I didn't slow down. The applause from the ceremony was still echoing faintly behind me, but I kept my eyes on the exit sign past the staff hallway. I wasn't interested in seeing who would dare look me in the eye after that moment. I hadn't come for approval. I'd come to witness something personal and leave, quietly, on my own terms. But just as I reached the bend near the maintenance closet, I heard heels clicking hard against the linoleum. Fast, determined. I knew that sound. Shelby always walked like she was declaring war. "Arliss!" she snapped behind me, her voice not yet loud enough for anyone else to hear, but just sharp enough to sting. I stopped. Not out of respect, not out of fear, but out of fatigue. I turned slowly, the overhead lights casting a dull sheen on the whitewashed walls around us. We were alone. Fitting. Her cheeks were still flushed, her breath shallow like she'd sprinted through her own promotion to chase me down. "What was that?" she hissed, standing just close enough to corner me, but far enough to not break the illusion of control. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Why are you a general?" I blinked at her, keeping my voice calm. "Because I didn't need to prove anything. Not to you." Her laugh was small and mean. "Oh, right. Still playing the wounded lamb, huh? Always so noble, always the victim." She stepped closer, the sharp scent of her department store perfume cutting into my space. "You humiliated me. That was my moment. You stole it, like you always do. Quiet little Arliss, lurking in the shadows, waiting for just the right second to ruin everything." I didn't flinch. "If your moment is so fragile that a single salute breaks it, maybe it wasn't yours to begin with." Her jaw tightened. "God, you sound so smug. You just had to make today about you. You can't stand not being seen." I started to answer, but a third voice cut in, low, unmistakable, and colder than both of ours combined. "She's right," Dad said. We both turned to see him standing at the end of the hallway, arms folded, face unreadable. He looked older in that light, more tired, but his voice had the same bite it always did when he wanted to shut something down. "You made a scene, Arliss," he said. "This was Shelby's day, and well, you've always had a way of pulling focus." I didn't move. I didn't plan that. I didn't even want it. He stepped forward, dismissing my words with a wave of his hand. "This is why your mother cried the day you enlisted. You never cared what your choices did to this family." I looked at him for a long time. "She didn't cry because I enlisted. She cried when she found out Shelby wasn't selected the first time." Shelby's head jerked back, like I'd slapped her. "You're lying," she whispered. "No. I was there when the letter came," I said quietly. She went into her room and shut the door. I heard her crying through it. She didn't speak to anyone for 2 days. When I got my orders, she didn't even come to the bus station. Dad's mouth opened, but no words came out. Shelby, however, found hers, fast and sharp. "You're twisting everything. You always do. You rewrite the story to make yourself the noble one and us the villains. Well, guess what, Arliss? No one bought it then, and they're not buying it now." I didn't answer. There was no point, because in that moment, the old script was being dusted off and played again. Me speaking any truth was suddenly self-pity, attention-seeking, manipulative. No matter how still I stood or how steady my voice, it was always too much. But they never knew what it actually cost me. I let myself remember something I hadn't let rise to the surface in years. Boot camp, week 6. We were halfway through a disaster response training drill when the ceiling of the obstacle tunnel collapsed. I was last in line. My squad leader's ankle was pinned. Another girl was unconscious. I crawled back in, got them both out. I remember the medics yelling at me to stay still, But I kept talking, kept trying to keep the girl awake. Next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, my ribs cracked, my knee torn. I stayed 2 weeks on base recovery. No visitors. I'd written letters, 5, I think. 1 to Mom, 1 to Dad, 2 to Shelby, 1 to Nana. Not one was answered. Later, I found out they told the extended family I had dropped out of training. The version they gave our church friends was that I was too weak to handle it. I overheard it when I came home once for the holidays years later. Turns out they were embarrassed. Not by what happened to me, but that I'd succeeded in a space they had always reserved for Shelby. I learned then that silence can be a weapon, and when a family chooses not to speak your name, they can erase you in ways no outsider ever could. I blinked, returning to the present. Dad and Shelby were still standing in front of me, still waiting for me to explain myself, apologize, justify my existence. I didn't. Instead, I straightened my shoulders. "You know," I said, "the saddest part is not that you didn't support me. It's that you buried what I did. Like it was shameful, just because it wasn't her." Shelby's voice cracked. "Stop pretending you're some kind of hero." "I'm not pretending," I said. "I just never needed your permission to be one." And with that, I walked past both of them, steady, measured, just like I had once walked onto the tarmac after deployment, unsure if anyone would be waiting. This time, I didn't look back. I didn't look back, but that didn't mean the past was finished with me. That night, after the last of the guests had cleared out and the only noise left in the house was the steady hum of the refrigerator, I sat alone in the kitchen with a chipped mug of lukewarm tea. My dress uniform still hung in the hallway closet. I hadn't had the energy to put it away, and, honestly, I wasn't sure what to do with it anymore. I stared at the faded paint on the wall in front of me, tracing invisible lines with my eyes, trying to block out Shelby's voice, still echoing in my skull. Then the phone rang. At first, I let it buzz halfway through the second ring. Most late-night calls weren't good news. But something in me, habit, instinct, reached for it anyway. "Hello?" There was a short pause, then a voice, nervous, careful, asked, "Ma'am, General Arliss?" My back straightened. I hadn't been called that in years. "Yes," I said slowly, cautious. "Who's this?" "It's Lieutenant Joshua Park. I served under you in Echo Battalion, 2009, downrange." My breath caught. Joshua Park. I remembered him, barely 20 back then, fresh out of West Point, always too polite for combat but brave when it counted. He used to carry a tattered Bible in his chest pocket and never swore, even after a mortar blast nearly took off his foot. "I saw the live stream," he continued quickly, "of the ceremony. You were standing right there, front row, and no one even mentioned your name. I thought I was seeing things." I stood up without realizing it, my hand tightening around the phone. "How'd you get my number?" "I've been at Pentagon Liaison Ops for a few months. Some permissions, some memory, and it wasn't easy. I hope that's okay." I sat back down, slowly. The chair creaked beneath me. "I wasn't expecting this." He chuckled nervously. "Neither was I. Honestly, ma'am, when you vanished from the radar after 15, most of us thought, well, that you didn't make it back. I made it," I said simply. "I know that now. But back then, rumors spread. Some said you were injured, others said you walked away after that last off-the-books op. But no one knew for sure. And you weren't listed anywhere public, not even in the retirement logs." I didn't answer right away. I'd spent years rehearsing explanations, only to end up staying silent. "I was reassigned," I said finally. "Classified. And when that ended, I didn't have much to come home to." He let that sit for a moment. "I get that. But people still remember you. They talk about you in training briefs, leadership seminars. Your name came up last month in a panel on tactical integrity under fire." My chest tightened, equal parts surprise and disbelief. Joshua's voice softened. "You should have been recognized at that ceremony." "That's not why I went," I replied. I didn't plan to go at all, just ended up there. There was silence on the line, not heavy, just respectful. Then he asked it. Ma'am, why didn't you ever tell your family? I exhaled slowly, pressing my thumb against the corner of the table. There was a groove there, carved years ago when I dropped a heavy mug. Funny what sticks around. My mother once told me, I said quietly, that Shelby needed the spotlight more than I did, that if I loved her, I'd step back quietly. So I did, and every time I tried to come home after that, it felt like I was intruding on something that didn't have space for me anymore. He didn't interrupt. I thought maybe if I came back successful enough, they'd change how they saw me. But the more I earned, the more they resented it. They never said it outright. But you know how it is. Some silences are louder than words. Joshua's voice came gently. But we saw you bleed, ma'am. I know, I said, my voice cracking just a little. You all saw me fight. You saw me lead. They only saw me fall. And they called me selfish for not staying small. Another pause. Then he said, I don't mean to overstep, but people would listen if you told your story. There's value in it, real value, especially for women coming up through the ranks. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. You always did believe in the power of good timing, Lieutenant. I mean it, he said earnestly. You could clear your name, reclaim your public record. I can help. We have channels. Let me think on it, I said. It's a lot. Of course. We exchanged a few more words, some light, some heavier. He gave me his direct line, promised discretion, told me to take care of myself. And then, after we hung up, I sat there for a long while, letting the quiet return. I didn't know yet whether I wanted to reopen those doors, but something about that call cracked the lock I'd sealed shut a long time ago. What Joshua didn't know was that Shelby had already begun her own quiet campaign to bury me again, this time on paper. Dawn bled into my kitchen before I managed a full night's sleep. I dozed off in the armchair around 2, phone still clutched in my hand, mind replaying Joshua's earnest offer like a stuck record. By 7:30, sunlight cut across the countertop and the smell of reheated coffee did little to improve my mood. The notification pinged at 7:42 a.m. sharp. Subject, clarification regarding misidentification at event. The header carried the venue's crest, neat and official. My gut tightened before I even opened the message. We apologize for any confusion during yesterday's ceremony, it began, so polite you could frame it. While a guest was mistakenly addressed with a military title, we've since confirmed she has no active or recognized status with any branch. I read it twice, each word scraping like gravel. Then I scrolled down. Forwarded threads. Shelby's name on every line. Her statements were highlighted in yellow, as though the PR officer wanted to ensure I didn't miss a single insult. She's been mentally unstable for years. We suspect she's impersonating a retired officer for attention. For the dignity of the service, please issue a correction. I set the phone face down, inhaled through my nose and counted to 5. Not to calm down. Calm was out of reach, but to keep from crushing the device in my grip. The house felt smaller, walls pressing in. I stood, crossed to the hallway closet, and retrieved an aging plastic envelope brittle at the edges. Inside were documents I rarely looked at, my final clearance certificate, after-action citations, an unpublicized commendation signed by a 3-star who'd since retired. Paper proof buried the moment I'd agreed to classified reassignment. I spread them across the kitchen table like a private exhibit. Names, dates, coordinates, ink that couldn't be erased by a jealous sibling's email. Yet Shelby was trying anyway. I needed a voice of reason, someone outside the blast radius of my family. My thumb hovered over a contact I hadn't dialed in 6 years. Colonel Desmond Lee answered on the 4th ring, breath heavy as if he'd jogged to the phone. Well, I'll be. General Mercer on a weekday morning. Everything all right? Depends on your definition, I said. You sitting down? He chuckled. I'm old, but not that old. What's going on? I summarized the ceremony, the salute, and the smear email in under 2 minutes. He didn't interrupt, though I heard the occasional rustle, maybe him pacing the study I remembered fondly, walls lined with campaign maps and photos of units long deactivated. When I finished, Desmond whistled low. "Your sister's playing a dangerous game. She's already contacted 2 veteran databases, requested record amendments. I got a ping last night from a colleague who thought the request smelled off. Figured I should warn you. So she's scrubbing me." My voice sounded detached even to my own ears. "She's trying to ghost you on paper," he confirmed. "Political families do it more than you'd think. Keeps inheritance lines tidy, preserves reputations. Ugly business." I looked at the citation bearing Desmond's own signature. "I didn't ask for money. I never asked for their praise. I just stood in a room." "I know," he said softly. "Listen, there's a group I've worked with before. Veterans advocacy folks who expose quiet character assassinations. No drama, strictly by the book verification. If you choose to fight, they'll guide you." I considered the folder on the table. The coffee had gone cold again. "Send me their info," I murmured. "You sure?" "I don't plan to start a war, but I won't let her rewrite history either." "Good," he said, relief in the single syllable. "Check your email in an hour. And Arliss?" "Yeah?" "Whatever they claim, the people who mattered out there, they remember." The call ended. I sat, staring at the glowing screen, half expecting another apology from the venue or maybe a retraction. Instead, a fresh email slid into view. Shelby's formal statement to the Army Alumni Network, long, indignant, dripping with superiority. She called me dangerously delusional, claimed I'd forged documents to mislead senior officers, said my presence posed a risk to the integrity of the event. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. Something inside me, something patient and strategic, clicked awake. I hadn't planned to fight back. But then I saw what she wrote in her formal statement, and something snapped. Something snapped, and the crack ran all the way back to the day I first laced combat boots. I closed Shelby's statement, pushed away from the table, and stepped onto the back porch to breathe air that hadn't passed through my sister's filter. Oh. A cool spring wind rattled the screen door. Birds argued in the maple tree, oblivious to sibling warfare. I reached into the pocket of my blazer, pulled out a small black thumb drive, and turned it over in my fingers. On its sticker, written in fading ink by Colonel Desmond years ago, was a single word: Wraith. My codename during those final assignments, one Shelby never learned. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked past 8. I moved back in, powered up my ancient laptop, and waited while it wheezed awake. The thumb drive slid home with a click. The screen flashed, then filled with folder names that still sent adrenaline through my veins. OP Candlestrike, Sandvale, Whisper Tango. I opened the last one. First came still photos. Our team crouched behind a rust-stained ambulance, villagers being ushered to safety under moonlight, me in dusty fatigues, right hand raised, signaling advance. Then a video, grainy body cam footage of a nighttime compound breach. My own voice emerged, steady, low, issuing orders with no hesitation. The timestamp showed a date 8 months after Shelby claimed I'd quit the service. I leaned back, letting the proof scroll past. Pride warmed places inside me that had felt iced over for years. A part of me wanted to dump every file online and watch the internet devour her lies in real time. Another part, the part trained to think strategically, chose precision over explosion. I selected 3 documents: the debrief summary signed by Joint Special Ops Command, a letter of commendation bearing General Whitmore's signature, and a still frame of me receiving a field promotion star under a desert sunrise. For punch, I attached a 5-second clip of the Whisper Tango infiltration, faces blurred except mine. Then I drafted a note to the advocacy contact Desmond had messaged earlier. Subject: preliminary evidence, verification request. I hit send. Less than 10 minutes later, the reply chimed. These materials are authentic and historically significant. With your permission, we can initiate a formal correction through DoD Public Affairs and provide media with verified context. Consent required. I stared at the blinking cursor. A lifetime of staying small warred with the sudden hunger to be whole in daylight. Before I could decide, another email arrived from a defense news outlet with a masthead that made senators nervous. Ms. Rains, sources indicate a classified operative codenamed Whisper Tango recently surfaced in an internal leak. We believe you are that officer. Will you confirm? My fingers hovered. Whisper Tango, my ghost of a name, never once spoken outside secure rooms. If reporters knew it, Shelby's smear campaign was already crumbling. The phone rang. Dad's number. Arliss, he said, no greeting. This is getting out of hand. You need to stop. Good morning to you too, I answered, keeping my tone level. You're embarrassing, Shelby, he continued. She's worked her entire life for respect. Now everyone's talking about some mystery background you refuse to share. Fix this. I closed my eyes, picturing him at the kitchen island in their suburban home, coffee steaming, pride stinging. I earned my place, Dad. I just never needed applause for it. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being documented. I ended the call before he could mount a counterattack. The advocacy emails still waited, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I opened a new message. 2 words. I consent. Click. The files were gone, on their way to people who wouldn't edit them out of family albums. A strange calm settled in my chest, the sort that arrives when the waiting ends and the mission finally starts. I shut the laptop, stood, and stepped outside again. The wind had quieted. Dawn had warmed to full morning. Somewhere Shelby was probably drafting another clarification, unaware that the ground beneath her script had shifted. Tomorrow's headlines would write themselves, and for once, I wouldn't be a footnote or a rumor. The next morning, my face was on the homepage of 3 national news outlets, with the headline, Forgotten General Finally Identified. Morning light bounced off my phone the moment I opened my eyes. Overnight, every news alert on Earth had conspired to beat my alarm. Forgotten General Finally Identified sat above a photo of me in desert camo, sweat-soaked and 20 years younger. Another headline declared, Sister of Rising Star turns out to be the real hero. The article paired Shelby's immaculate dress blues with my grainy field shot like a cruel before and after. I silenced the buzz long enough to brew coffee. By the time the kettle hissed, my inbox had swollen past 100 unread. Veterans I'd led, journalists hungry for exclusives, a retired chaplain who once prayed over our company before a night raid, gratitude, outrage, curiosity poured into digital paragraphs. In the crowd of subject lines, one message glowed, Formal promotion, please RSVP. I clicked. Family encouraged to attend, it read. Below, in tight cursive, far more elegant than Shelby's, someone had scrawled, General Arliss Mercer, your presence is requested. I set the phone down, unsure whether to laugh or swear. I was still debating when the doorbell rang. The courier handed me a stiff white envelope stamped with the Department of Defense seal. Inside, an official commendation request noting an oversight in my post-retirement honors. 2 decades late, but there it was, signed by a deputy secretary. By dusk, the day had looped from surreal to absurd. I was spooning out leftovers when my phone rang again. Shelby. They're saying you outrank me now, she said without greeting. Her voice sounded brittle like glass under strain. You always do this. Show up, steal the air out of the room, make everything about you. I leaned against the counter. No, you spent years pretending I wasn't in the room. There's a difference. Silence, then a sharp inhale. You don't get it. I worked every day for that promotion. I worked too, I said quietly, but I didn't need an audience for it. She muttered something, either a curse or my name, then the line went dead. I set the phone aside, palms tingling with a mix of anger and pity. It wasn't long before it rang again. This time the caller ID read General Harold Elroy. Evening, Arliss, the old commander said, voice warm as campfire embers. I figured you'd need context before tomorrow blindsides you again. He got to it quickly. Years ago, Shelby had quietly requested my field records be sealed. for family privacy. When the archive chief balked, she pushed to label them inaccurate. The chain of command refused. They'd recognized the attempt for what it was: sibling sabotage masquerading as guardianship. I exhaled through my teeth. She never wanted me hidden for modesty's sake. She just couldn't stand my shadow. "Truth has long legs," Elroy said. "It caught up today. The rest is up to you." After we hung up, I pulled the old uniform from its garment bag, the wool still carrying the faint scent of cedar chips. It fit, snug at the shoulders, but the buttons closed without protest. I pinned my unit brooch above the heart, the metal cool against skin. No one needed to know I was coming. No dramatic entrances this time, just presence, pure and simple. At dawn, I drove north, low traffic, radio off. The city skyline rose through spring haze as I parked 2 blocks from the auditorium. I walked the distance alone, heels tapping a rhythm steadier than my pulse. Inside, ushers guided me toward family seating, but I shook my head and slipped into a side aisle seat, 3rd row, close enough to see Shelby's face when the program reached my name. The lights dimmed. An announcer in dress whites took the stage, voice amplified and solemn. He began reading honored guests. "Retired Major General Arliss Mercer." My name echoed up to the balcony. Before I could rise, every officer in the front row stood as one, chairs scraping, medals glinting. The auditorium followed, a ripple of respect spreading backward until even the last civilian visitor was on their feet. I walked toward the center aisle, heart drumming against starched fabric, feeling the weight of eyes that once skimmed past me finally come to rest. I walked into that auditorium, alone. But when the announcer read my name, the entire front row stood. Silence can roar. When every officer in that auditorium rose, the sudden hush felt louder than artillery. I kept moving down the aisle, each step measured, my shoes whispering against the carpet. Shelby stood at the podium, notes trembling in her grip. The moment our eyes met, a flicker crossed her face. Recognition, then fear. Rows of uniforms, polished and proud, filled the hall. Cameras perched on tripods, red lights blinking like wary eyes. I reached the front row and paused in the side aisle, unwilling to push past anyone. The announcer adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to welcome retired Major General Arliss Mercer. Her presence elevates this occasion." A ripple of conversation rolled across the audience. Somewhere near the back, a woman murmured, "I thought her sister said she was a clerk." The words carried farther than she intended. Shelby stiffened, throat working as she swallowed. She forced a smile. "Oh, that's my sister. She used to be in the service for a bit." The lie dangled, obvious as spinach in her teeth. General Elroy, seated to the left of the stage, rose without waiting for protocol. He strode up the steps, halted beside Shelby, and faced me. His salute cracked like a starter pistol. "General Mercer, it's an honor, ma'am." Gasps burst around us. Shelby's husband straightened so quickly his chair skidded back. Dad, 3 seats in, went colorless and stared at his shoes as though they'd offered sudden answers. I returned Elroy's salute, sharper than habit, crisper than memory. "Thank you, sir." He nodded, then stepped aside, granting me a clear line of sight to the podium. Shelby tried to continue. Her voice, usually smooth as varnish, faltered. We gathered today to recognize excellence in leadership." Someone in the 3rd row, a young lieutenant with an eager face, raised a phone and whispered to a friend. A journalist beside him caught the cue and angled her lens toward me instead of the podium. Within seconds, live stream comments scrolled over screens held aloft. "That's Whisper Tango?" Shelby lied. She said her sister never served. "General Mercer saved my cousin in 12. She's a legend." Shelby's composure cracked. A bead of sweat slipped down her temple. The mic caught the faint tremor in her breath. She shuffled her papers, searching for the next line, but every sentence turned to dust. Flash memories flashed across my mind. Shelby taunting me at 14. "You'll never lead anyone." Shelby at 22. "You're embarrassing the family." Shelby last week. "You're pretending to be a hero." Each jab now echoed back at her, amplified by the very crowd she'd invited. A reporter stood. "Colonel Rains, you described your sister as non-military. Care to clarify your statement in light of new information?" The question hit like a baton to the knees. Shelby's eyes darted to Dad, but he looked elsewhere, suddenly fascinated by an exit sign. Mom pursed her lips, clutching her purse strap as if it might save her from drowning. I stayed silent, letting the room adjust to the new gravity. I wasn't there to humiliate. I was there to exist. Shelby cleared her throat. We can address that after the ceremony." Yet her voice wilted on the last word. The audience sensed blood in the water. Focus shifted permanently. Backstage, staff exchanged frantic whispers. The ceremony stumbled forward, applause polite but distracted. When Shelby finally pinned on the silver eagles, fewer cameras captured it than captured me crossing to the far aisle and slipping out a side door. The hallway smelled of floor wax and panic. Halfway to the exit, Dad jogged after me. Decades of drill still gave him speed. "You should have told us," he said, voice hoarse. I met his gaze. "You never asked." He opened his mouth, but no rebuttal arrived. I left him standing there, hands on hips, like a man who'd practiced speeches for years but forgotten every word. Outside, the afternoon sun felt warmer than it should. Reporters called my name from the curb. I kept walking, turned a corner, and reached my car without once looking back. The drive home was quiet, save for the low hum of tires on asphalt. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light glowed though the sun hadn't set. Shelby sat on the top step, knees drawn up, uniform cap in her lap, eyes swollen from tears or fury. I couldn't tell which. I killed the engine, sat a long moment behind the wheel, then finally stepped out. I left the ceremony without a word. But when I got home, Shelby was waiting on my porch. She didn't speak right away. I had barely stepped onto the porch, my keys still in hand, when I saw her there. Shelby, sitting on the top step like a child sent out of class. Her hair was pulled back messily, her blazer gone, heels traded for worn-out flats. There was no press badge, no entourage, no trace of the tightly wound officer I'd seen hours earlier on that stage, and resting on her lap was a box, a simple wooden shadow box. She stood slowly as I approached, lifting it with both hands like it might fall apart if she wasn't careful. When she held it out, I saw what was inside, my silver star, set neatly beside a faded photograph. Us, as girls. I remembered that picture. I was maybe 9. She must have been 12. We were both covered in dirt from climbing trees, laughing at something off camera. I'd thought that photo was lost a long time ago. I didn't take the box right away. I looked at her face first. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry now. Her lip quivered just slightly when she said, "I found them, in Mom's storage unit." I didn't move. I just waited. She kept them in an old tin, wrapped in one of her scarves, tucked behind boxes of holiday decorations. She lowered her eyes. "She told me you didn't deserve reminders. Said if people remembered who you really were, they'd forget me." The night breeze stirred her blouse, and I could hear the faint rattle of wind chimes from the neighbor's porch. I hadn't even turned on the lights inside yet. Everything between us felt lit by memory more than electricity. "I didn't know," she whispered, "how much I wanted their love until I realized the only way I could get it was by erasing you." Her voice cracked, but not in a practiced way. It wasn't her speech voice or her press interview tone. It was something softer, almost young. "I think I became them," she said. That made me look up. And it made her cry, not loud sobs, not the kind of tears you use to manipulate a room, just quiet, hollow trembles. Her body sagged slightly as if she didn't know how to stand in her own spine anymore. "You always stood alone, Arliss," she said, "and I thought that made you weak. I see now. It made you free." I still hadn't taken the box. It felt like if I did, I might be agreeing to more than I was ready for. Then came the twist in her voice. "I'm stepping down." I blinked. "From the base?" "From command. It's not because of the press or Elroy's salute or the trending hashtags. It's me. I'm tired of pretending I earned that spot by silencing you." She looked at the box again. "I built everything on their blueprint. All of it. The titles, the performances, the damn mirror image of who they wanted me to be. But you built your life on nothing but your own grit, and you never once needed their applause to stand straight." I still didn't say a word. Not yet. She took a slow breath and added, "I don't expect forgiveness. I wouldn't know what to do with it if you gave it." I reached out. Not for her hand, but for the box. I took it gently, like it weighed more than it did, like it held all the years I'd buried. Her shoulders lowered, maybe from relief, or maybe she just didn't know how else to stand anymore without the armor. I gave her one small nod. Then I stepped inside and closed the door. It didn't slam, it didn't echo. It just ended. Later that night, long after Shelby's car had driven off and the porch light flickered itself out, I found myself back in the place I used to volunteer, an old community center tucked between a laundromat and a rundown library. They'd reopened the small veterans training room a month ago, and though I hadn't returned since the last deployment photos were taken off the wall, something pulled me there now. Inside, a girl, couldn't have been more than 14, was struggling through an exercise routine. Prosthetic leg, short cropped hair, sweat pouring down her brow. She kept falling, kept getting up. But I saw it. The flicker of doubt, the silent scream of, "Maybe I don't belong." I didn't interrupt. Not right away. I sat on the bench beside her water bottle, placed the silver star down without a word. She looked over, puzzled. I leaned in, met her eye. "No one gets to tell you what you're worth," I said. "You show them." She didn't nod, didn't cry, just stared down at the metal like it wasn't real. Then she stood up straighter. Weeks passed, seasons started to turn, and 2 months later that same girl, hair longer now, posture sure, saluted me at a local ceremony. No press, no hashtags, just her standing tall in a uniform she'd earned her way into. I didn't cry then either. But something in me settled. My family still doesn't mention me. Not at holidays. Not in emails. Not even in the faded photo albums on their bookshelves. But that girl? She found her way forward. And when she raised her hand that day, I didn't feel erased anymore. I felt home.